Welcome to a very special Pro Football Doc podcast. Special for several reasons. Number one is it is the last podcast of the off season here. After this, we get into injuries every Monday. And in the off season, we're honored to have guests. And I think we're finishing up with a flourish. We had Evan Silva, arguably the best fantasy analyst out there on the podcast. Warren Sharp, arguably the best analytics guy out there. And now we have the great Billy Walters, inarguably the greatest sports bettor in history. And my proof of that is in the very first, I was lucky enough to go to Bet Bash, and at Bet Bash, the Sports Gambling Hall of Fame wall, Billy Walters, first inductee, and it says, known for being the greatest sports bettor of all time, commands respect from every prominent bookmaker in the world, as well as a philanthropist and contributor to many other causes. But this is the Sports Gambling Hall of Fame saying you're the greatest sports gambler of all time. So we're thrilled to have you on board with us here today. Welcome.
Thank you, Doc. It's good to be here, and it's good to be here with my favorite football injury specialist.
Well, we'll get to that a little bit. So my first question for you is, you're anointed by the Sports Gambling Hall of Fame as being the greatest. You're anointed as the Michael Jordan, so to speak, okay? So who would be on your Mount Rushmore? Obviously, you're there. You're George Washington on the Mount Rushmore, for lack of a better phrase. Who else would you put up there on a Mount Rushmore if there was one in terms of sports gambling, etc.?
I really hadn't thought about that, Doc. I don't know who would go there. I really can't answer that.
There you go. Translation. Billy's the greatest, but there's so many other people he don't want to forget the translation. So we're fortunate enough at Sports Injury Central. Certainly I've always heard of Billy Walters, but thank you for saying your favorite injury expert. But I started getting text messages when your book was published of people screenshotting the book. And I was like, what is this, that kind of thing? And then, of course, when you went on Joe Rogan, a lot of text messages and whatever. I had friends that know me forever and know what I do. Probably didn't give a darn until they realized Billy Walters was onto it. So thank you for that, and I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. You referenced the book, and for a long time I never dreamed I would write a book. When I did decide to write a book, there were a number of reasons I wrote it. You got millions and millions of new sports bettors, and I decided to write a book and share everything that I knew about sports betting, sports handicapping, and it's a candid book. It's not a vanity book, and like I said, everything that I know about it's in there, and that includes you and your expertise when it comes to evaluating pro football injuries. So you're a major part of what I do and what we do. We're like a lot of people. We have, I don't know about a lot of people, but we're like other handicappers. We have a lot of sources to injury information. And I have a lot of people on my team who evaluate injury information. We've been doing this for a long time, and we're pretty daggone good at it. But bottom line is, we respect you more than any source or anyone that we've ever encountered out there because of your medical background. More importantly, not only your medical background combined with how it interacts with obviously football players and athletes. And I don't know of anyone else out there that we've encountered or we've experienced that has that type of expertise.
Well, I appreciate that, and I feel like what you've accomplished in life is much harder than what little I've accomplished in this space, you in the gambling space, because you you worked your way to the top of the mountain. For me, I look at it as an unfair advantage. We're very proud that we spawned a whole industry of injury analysts. I mean, even at Bet Bash when we were speaking, apparently there were a handful of injury analysts from other sites that were there. And we welcome it. And I think it's great, but the differentiator is not just being an orthopedist, not being a surgeon who does meniscus repairs so they can tell you what the effect is on J.J. McCarthy, but as a team physician, not all injuries are the same on all players, and there's a very qualitative aspect. And I had the fortune of studying film for 17 years, where I would look at a player on the field, on the sideline, the next day after an MRI, know exactly what the outcome was, and then go back and reverse engineer and look at the factors that led to it, which is the video. When I had 30 minutes before meeting with the GM, I had no idea when I was doing that with the San Diego Chargers that it would lead to anything else. I was just doing it to better my craft because everyone in the room, everyone in a football room on Monday in the offices and facilities are looking at film. So I figured I should too. And that's where we learn now that what we do is from the outside, and we're sitting here in our war room with all the TVs looking at video, reverse engineering just the video without the MRI and whatever, and that's where we get the experience and the accuracy. And I would look at it as we have an unfair advantage over anyone else because of having done that. Whereas, what was your differentiator other than from, I've been very fortunate here, full disclosure, to get to know Billy now over the last 6 months or so. And I would say your difference is good old-fashioned ingenuity, hard work, independence, and innovator in terms of what you do.
Well, thank you so much for your kind words. And, when a player is out from one week to the next, we have a long time to be able to evaluate how that's going to impact, the next game, the next opponent, and how it's going to impact the team. If we're looking at futures, how it's going to impact the team for the rest of the year. I don't think I haven't told you this, but I'll share it with you now. Your information to us from that perspective is extremely valuable, and it's our number one component in regards to, a player from week to week. But your injury information, as far as I'm concerned, that's the most valuable to us is in-game betting information. I don't have the luxury to talk to 7 different teams of people or to check 5 or 6 different sources. Your background, your unique ability to be able to evaluate that player, whether he is going to come back, and if so, how effective or ineffective he's going to be, how that's going to affect the balance of the outcome of that game, offensively, defensively. To me, that's invaluable. And at halftime, too, player goes down the first half, okay? And then, your information there, we rely more on that than we do almost anything if there's a major player injured. Because, we've got a pretty good idea of, we look at full game analysis all along. And we're great at doing halftimes. We've been doing those for a long, long time too. But, when you've got to make a split decision and there's a major injury involved, with somebody who's going to be a major part of that, of the rest of that game, whether it be a quarterback or some really important player, even on defense, a TJ Watt or something such as that. Having your information to us is invaluable. That's something that we can't go out, and we don't have the luxury of a lot of time to be able to, to gather that and evaluate it.
Well, thank you, Billy, but I have to say this. First of all, it's not just me. In here on a Sunday in the war room, we'll have 8 people here monitoring every game. But not just monitoring the game and here's the video. I'll tell you a little secret. You probably could sometimes, after a busy Sunday, put me in a time machine to 9 a.m. in Las Vegas. And I'm not sure I could win any money because we're paying attention to the injuries rather than the score and the flow of the game and, with 8-10 games on, etc. And this is why we have the team of people. And what the team of people does isn't just, Patrick Mahomes in or out or whatever. It's, okay, the Detroit Lions started the game missing 2 of their 4 top corners. Now they just lost a third. And they're ahead, but the other team is going to be able to chase. the cluster injuries that we know about ahead of time, and not only evaluating the injury itself, evaluating the injury in the context of the position and the position group and the team. And that's what we're able to do here, because it's not just me looking at it. We have a team of doctors as well, but it's the team that we have in all the red shirts on Sunday here that makes it a comprehensive effort, rather than what I used to do, which is sit at home on my couch and tweet. And that's why we're here in the war room. And we're trying to do it very professionally, what I would say Billy Walters style.
Well, you are, in my opinion, and again, we're totally tuned in on Sunday, because in-game betting and halftime betting for us is a big part of what we do. We talk a lot about betting sides and betting games, and we do, but in-game betting and halftime betting has always been a big part of what I do, and injuries are, I mean, they're so important, and I mean, today there's almost not a game that's played where there isn't an in-game injury. So being able to tap into your expertise from a medical standpoint, yeah, we've got all the handicapping information in the entire world, but having your expertise as far as how that's going to affect whether it's this player's ability to come back or not. Yeah, we know who the backup is. We can figure all those things out. But for my friend in Kentucky who works, he's an IT guy or he's a normal guy and he's watching the game, to have the ability to be able to, have your knowledge of how that's going to impact the rest of the game, I would sure think that's going to help him or her immensely.
Thank you for that. So you have a best-selling book. If there was an extra chapter or a next book, or what didn't make the book that almost did, that is impactful, what was the next chapter, so to speak?
Well, there wasn't any shortage of material for the book.
No question.
We had about 1,000 pages. Of course,
No
you can't
question.
sell a 1,000-page book.
But I know you could have filled up 7,000 pages.
Yeah, we probably could have. And we got a documentary coming out. It'll be out probably toward the end of the year, and so we were able to cover a few things in there that we didn't get in the book. But everything in the world that I know about sports betting and sports handicapping and basic betting strategy, 100% of that's in the book. And all of you talk about the success I've had betting sports, and I have been successful, and I'm very thankful for that. But I've had a lot of ups and downs in sports betting. When I started, I didn't start off, winning. I started off, I went through some rocky patches, but I think the book is probably as much or more about resiliency than it is anything else. But it was a difficult road to travel, so to speak, and I feel very fortunate to being able to be where I'm at.
So tell the world a little bit, because I don't think they know as much about A, your philanthropy, and B, what you're trying to do in terms of the gambling space, in terms of reform, or what you want to see happen.
Well, I've never really talked a lot publicly about philanthropy, because that's something that, I guess it's public, but I don't try to.
Well, Sports Gambling Hall of Fame put philanthropy right up there.
And that's one of the most fulfilling things I've ever been involved with in my life, is helping others. And I have a son who's intellectually challenged, and he's been involved with an organization called Opportunity Village for a long time. And as a result, I got involved in that world, and it's something from my perspective and my wife Susan's perspective, it's one of the most fulfilling things we've ever been involved with. Later on in my life, I went to prison, and my eyes got open in regards to that life and the people in there and how it affected them and their families. So since I've gotten out of that, I've gotten involved with an organization called Hope for Prisoners in Las Vegas, and it's a reentry program, and we're really excited about that and the impact it's having on families. And so yeah, that's one of the most fulfilling things that I've ever been involved with, is philanthropy and helping others.
Great. So usually when we do this podcast, it's usually with a remote guest. We have some that have been in studio here, but I would say that this is the first one that we've ever done with an actual pseudo audience of people. Usually it's maybe just the producer and the guest and whatever. We got a full audience here. So I will invite some audience participation here. If any of you guys can shout out the question that you might have for Billy here, since you guys are spending, which actually is a Labor Day holiday weekend day. I know you guys got kids and whatever here, but they did not want to miss meeting and witnessing the great Billy Walters in person. So I will open up the floor to questions. Craig, Doug, Taylor, whoever
What's
else.
the most common mistake beginning bettors make? I know that you like to help the little guys and get information out there. What's one thing that regular bettors commonly do wrong?
So in case Craig wasn't on the mic there, common mistake for beginning bettors, the most common thing that people make.
Well, betting strategy is to the average bettor who's not a professional handicapper. I think it's as important, almost as important as a handicapping. And the common mistake, there's a number of them that I talked about in the book, and that's the reason I wrote the basic betting strategy in there. It was for the millions and millions of people that fall in that category, not for the 1% of professional handicappers. And basic information is out there at your fingertips. On your smartphone, you can see the line from multiple sports books, multiple places. The average bettor normally has one sports betting account. They bet with one place, and they bet with their heart instead of their mind, so to speak, in a lot of cases. They chase losses. They don't have a money management system. They don't have any discipline. And then, what concerns me, and it was a prior question that Doc just asked me, because of all of the new millions of sports bettors and the way that, these sports books have gone about, giving people, a college kid, $1,500, $2,000, putting in his account. When I was a kid, they gave away free cigarettes at college campuses. Today, they're giving you a free $1,500, $2,000 in your account, and to many of these kids, that's the most money they've ever had to get them started, so to speak. And so they start betting, and in many cases, they look at it as, okay, I got a chance to make a lot of money here quick, and I'm going to kill the world betting sports. And next thing you know, they've lost that, and they've lost control, and it could possibly very well lead into an addiction, which creates a problem. Don't misunderstand me. I'm very, very much pro-gambling, pro-sports betting. I'm so happy that they legalized sports betting in the United States. It's been a lifelong dream of mine for a number of reasons. But the way they've gone about, marketing this to new customers, it does concern me to a large degree because of the potential addiction aspect. Today with the smartphone, you're getting 6 or 8 push ads a day from these sports books, do this, do that, and then on top of it, you get somebody brand new to the sport. And so it's so easy to get caught up into that world. And but just from a basic betting standpoint, you need to have as much information as you can out there. You need to take the best lines. Just don't bet with one place. You want to get as many accounts as you possibly can if you're going to bet sports, regardless of the amount. And make sure you get the best line and get as much information as you can before you bet. It's right there at your fingertips. Get Doc's injury information, get other information out there. There's all types of things to read, and you got some people out there disseminating things that are credible, and you got some that aren't. It won't take you very long to figure out, from your perspective, who you feel like has the most credibility. And I would listen to some of those people. The NFL Network, I'm a big proponent, big fan of the NFL Network. I think they do a great job with the pro football. And so to me, it would be set aside whatever the amount of money is you feel like you can afford to lose, because you know what? You're probably going to lose it. And it's a recreation. I'm going to have some fun, but I'm going to give myself the best chance of winning. And what can I do if I'm not a professional sports bettor? I get the best line, okay, and I can understand the value of key numbers, and I can make sure when I make a bet that I'm trying to take advantage of that instead of laying or taking bad numbers. At least you give yourself a fighting chance if you do that, and you won't get yourself in a lot of trouble from a personal standpoint.
You bring up NFL Network, and one thing that I've always said, Billy, is that people in the beginning thought maybe I I do know the vast majority, if not all, the doctors and athletic trainers in the NFL still, but I don't call any of them for information, because if I did, it would be a Hippa violation, and they would hang up on me if I asked about their play. Look, when I was in the NFL, and the team doctors and athletic trainers would meet before a game and say hello, and we knew they had injuries, they knew we had injuries, but out of respect, we would never ask the other side about their injuries. It's like, because of Hippa, and honestly, there are occasions that a doctor might talk to me about an injury, or an agent, or a player, but then it makes it off limits because it's HIPAA. I know about it and I can't talk about it anymore. But I think the advantage is it's insider knowledge as opposed to insider information on these injuries, and knowing how a team might treat something. Going back to, let's say, Joe Burrow at the beginning of last season with his calf. They were 0-2, his calf was bothering him, and there was a lot of chatter among media that he's going to sit the third game, sit out. And I said he is not going to sit out. And the reason why is you can't afford to go on 3. And if sitting out one game would mean his calf is now all the way better, the Bengals will take the risk of going 0-3. But because calf injuries linger, sitting out one game isn't going to fix him. So therefore, they were just going to have to manage him and play through, and that's exactly what happened, etc. So I think some of that is insider knowledge from having worked with teams and have those discussions in the room. And I think that, in addition to quantifying injuries the right way and knowing is what the difference maker is. And the final thing I'll say is, I don't know if I ever said this publicly, but I've been very fortunate to meet the likes of you, and I've been very fortunate to meet a lot of different media professionals, radio and otherwise. And it's not uncommon for a reporter potentially to call and ask me, what do you think about this injury, or what does it look like, kind of thing, and what questions that they should ask the agent or the team to elucidate, information to the public. Whenever that happens, I end up going into a conversation and say, well, tell me what you know related to how it happened. Was it really non-contact? There was no video here. It was in training camp. What are your sources telling you? I look at that as just, we gather publicly available information, and they have additional information that we, not being on the ground in a certain city, may not have. So we do some of that insider information stuff, but it's not secret like related to medicine. It's just what this reporter knows. He's got the whole story, and maybe we share information among ourselves in playing detective. And that's the other thing that we do commonly do. And of course, and these guys know in the room all the time, I always tell them, don't give me the quote from this coach, the one sentence that the reporter says. Give me the actual source information, the link, whether it's looking at facial expressions, looking at what he's saying, but the whole context of the answer in the interview tells you more than the one little snippet quote. And I look at that, and we look at that as source information, just like the video itself, all angles, how he was immobilized, how he was taken off, etc. And that's what we look at. But the one nugget I'll give people is, we always judge the injury, not the reaction to the injury. Because sometimes someone may pull up from a hamstring, and they pull up at the right moment, so that's not very much injured at all. But they're really mad, and they still throw their helmet, and they're carted off. Or sometimes they pull up because they really can't, and it's a grade 3 tear. So we look at the peripheral information and the actual mechanism of injury more than, players gathered around and gave him a hug. That's not always the thing. Sometimes players are very emotional about smaller injuries, and just because someone's carted off doesn't mean it's the end. A lot of times it depends on, where's the location of x-ray in a certain stadium? Is it far away? I mean, I've encountered all that. So we look at all that peripheral information and source information. All right, so more crowd questions. Go ahead.
Well, that's what differentiates you from an injury report. What you just pointed out, that type of expertise. 99.9% of people that issue injury reports, they don't have any of that. They can tell you this guy's injured, that guy's injured. Figuring it out to that level, and how it's going to affect that player. I don't know of anybody else that does that Does that, I really don't. And I'm not sitting here and saying this because we're doing this interview, this podcast. I'm being as honest as I know how to be. And it's just, you mentioned that third week of the season last year. If you were doing fantasy football, how valuable was that if you were doing fantasy football and you knew Joe Burrow was going to play the third week?
Well, one of the things that the team's worked on here is a fantasy football optimizer. Everyone, like the great Evan Silva, has projections in a given week. But do those projections always factor in not only the health of a particular running back, but the health of their offensive line? They factor in the schemes, absolutely. They're really good at it. But the health of the offensive line or the health of the defense front seven that they're going against this week. And so that's another thing that we're working on at Sports Injury Central, et cetera. And what we pride ourselves in, as you indicate, is injury analysis as opposed to injury reporting. We look at all the reports, but it's injury analysis that we really focus on in looking at all the peripheral stuff. All right, guys, you guys spent your holiday here. Questions for?
I got a question. What's your most unlucky bet or bad beat that you had in your career? Do you remember?
Oh, great. Bring up the nickname.
Yeah, of course.
Strong work
Yeah.
there.
Well, that's okay. Man, I'll tell you what, I've had so many of them, I almost have scar tissue. I've been doing this for a long time, so worst bad beat I've ever had. Man, I've had some bad ones. Actually, the Buffalo, Tennessee game years ago was pretty bad. I'm not sure that was the worst one, but it was certainly in the top 10.
The miracle.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
I was on the wrong side of the miracle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
What
I've
do
had
they
some
call
good
it?
ones, too.
What do they call that play?
Musical
Miracle.
Yeah.
Now, I will say something
Yeah.
that if I believe it was the 25-yard line, if the Frank Wycheck throwback didn't happen on the 25-yard line and it happened on the 27, I believe visually and optically it gets called a forward
That's a
pass.
forward, yeah.
Because there is a line on the ground that you can follow. That is what made that, the optical illusion of it being a forward pass made it, quote, legal. And I don't know if you're this podcast guest and friend of the show and my friend on that team. Who else is on that part of that?
Oh, we talked about this already. I remember.
Lorenzo Neal.
Yes, that's right.
Was
Yes,
part of that
yeah.
in Tennessee.
Yep.
The throwback in Music City Miracle. Yeah, that's certainly a very bad beat. The other one that I would say, and I wasn't even gambling, I was wrong. I still remember being in Aspen for the Winter X Games on the Tom Brady incomplete pass fumble in the snow against the Raiders. And I swore to everyone at dinner that there's no way that's not a fumble because it came out of his hand, but I was not aware of the quote tuck rule.
Yeah.
I always remember that game because my mom sent me to bed early and I didn't get to watch the end, so I watched from the stairs at the top of the stairs at the end of that game.
Well,
He's an angry Raiders fan. So, this is one happy moment.
I've sat here, I've had a moment to think about it. The toughest beat I ever took was the first half bet I actually had when Arizona played the Steelers in the Super Bowl. And they're on the goal line, Arizona.
Oh yeah, I know the play.
Yeah, and the last, Warner throws the ball over the middle and James Harrison intercepts this ball and big old linebacker, he lumbers down the field 100 yards. Larry Fitzgerald's after him. One of his own player impedes him going down the sidelines.
You remember that? You always say that.
Yeah, and then
Yep.
James Harrison falls in the end zone, and it cost me the halftime total. I think altogether, it cost me over $1 million. But
This is where I'm going to be self-aggrandizing and say great minds. I've told Taylor...
You always bring up the person stepping out first.
And Larry Fitzgerald, look, how does James Harrison run 100 yards without being caught? One of the reasons is Larry Fitzgerald, go back and look at the film, was busting his rear.
He was going to get there.
He got blocked
Yep.
out of bounds,
yeah,
right? And one of his defensive players was standing on the white,
correct.
thinking he was way out of the way of the play and never moved.
Right.
And Larry Fitzgerald runs smack dab into him.
Yep.
There's a great block that cost him 10 yards. He would have been tackled on the 10.
Yeah.
Instead, he got tackled at the 1 inch line and fell in. Now, obviously, the significance is if he's tackled at the 1 inch line or the 10, it's halftime. There's not even a field goal.
Yeah,
It's done. But because of the unfortunate, I'm not trying to call out the one player, but go look it up. You know who it is. But it wasn't on purpose, obviously. He thought he was well out of the play. But that was very, very, yeah, I think that has to qualify as a super bad beat. Because not only because you're about to score and get your first half, but then he comes back all the way and should have been tackled.
I didn't need to score. I had the halftime bet won. I didn't. If Arizona hadn't scored at all, if the clock just ran out where it was at, Pittsburgh had to come back and score.
That qualifies as the worst beat ever. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's make it happier. What's the biggest bet you ever made that you won?
Or that you're proud of, I guess. Yeah.
Well, the biggest bet I ever made on one was on New Orleans when they played the Colts in the Super Bowl. When they came out with the line, I couldn't believe the line. I mean, normally at the end of the year, the numbers are getting closer and closer and closer. And playoffs, sometimes there's more, there's more of a difference in our line and their line in the playoffs because of the way we look at playoffs sometimes. But I made that game like pick 'em. And the number came out in Indianapolis was 7. Couldn't believe it. And I ended up betting $4.5 million on New Orleans. And I needed them for another $2 million in the futures. I bet on them to win the Super Bowl earlier in the year. And so it ended up being a real big bet for them, the biggest bet I ever made. But I just couldn't believe the line. And, the way my system works, I make a line on a game, I'll make a prediction. And the larger the differential between, my number and their number, the more I bet. And, in pro football, rarely do we find something where we're as much as, 3.5 points off from the number out there. Pro football numbers are pretty easy to make. But this game here, we had a 7-point differential. I couldn't believe it. I went back and redid my work on to make sure I didn't make a mistake. But anyway, we had to pick them. They made it 7. So.
Well, you bring up another good point. One of the things that we have to tell people, look, we're not touts. We're medical guys. And there's a system, and yes, if you took us blindly, if there's an 8-point difference, it's 55.1% winners against the spread. Okay, whatever. But the bottom line is, what I say is, for the common guy out there, if you like a team, and we end up telling you that they're healthier by a good amount over another team, Team A is healthier than Team B, and you like Team A, maybe you want to go 2 units on that one, because your analysis is fitting the injury side. On the other hand, if you like Team B and we're saying Team A is healthier, maybe you got to look at unit management, as you say. And so we're not just trying to be touts, we're just trying to give an extra category of information to bettors like you or others to put into the equation of whatever they want to do, rather than being a traditional tout in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, well, injury information, obviously, in the NFL is one of the most important components we have, but we have every player in the NFL rated. So when our player's out, I've got a pretty good idea what the differential is. And you mentioned clusters. I think a lot of people know about clusters. I don't think that's anything new to any of us. And, in the book that I wrote, I gave an example when Tampa played the Rams, for the finals of the conference. And Tristan Wirth was out for Tampa. Against the rest of the league and for the rest of the year, Tristan Wirth was worth less than 2 points. But in that particular game, because of the way Tampa was injured already with their center, with Tristan's backup, he could barely stand himself. But Tom Brady being as immobile as he was, with the wide receiver situation that they had also, Godwin was gone. Mm-hmm. Tristan Wirth was probably worth 6-7 points in that situation because of the cluster effect, because of his backup, and more importantly, because Tom Brady, probably the least mobile quarterback in the entire league, and then on top of that, he had one less receiver to throw the ball to. So if you go back and you look at that film in that game, of course, you got a photographic memory. I know you remember it. the first couple series that that Tampa had the ball, he had to throw the ball in the dirt to keep him getting sacked. And bottom line was, they ended up having to keep Gronk in to help block.
And he changes the game, yes.
That changes the game totally. He only had one wide receiver to throw the ball to. Yeah, they brought another guy in, but essentially, offensively, it was strictly because of Tristan Wirth. I mean, Godwin being out hurt them, but if Gronk could have played normally and he hadn't had to stay in the block, offensively, Tampa would have been entirely different.
Well, you're right about the clusters and key positions, and for fans out there, you could do all the research, but we do it for you. But I'll give you an example, Billy, where it really helped Tom Brady. I mean, obviously, Tom Brady, a lot of his unbelievable legacy, he had a great legacy before, was winning in Tampa.
When they played Kansas City.
When they played Kansas City, right? So Eric Fisher, the left tackle, gets hurt in the AFC Championship game. And, okay, you might survive that, but they were already on right tackle 3, so they went from left tackle 1 to left tackle 2, the backup. But the right tackle was already hurt, so the right tackle 2 flipped to left tackle 2, which gave them right tackle 3, and the right guard slid out. So 60% of the Kansas City offensive line, based on Eric Fisher, had never played together in those spots all season long. Not to mention, now you're backups, one spot affecting multiple spots along the line, and that was the one where Patrick Mahomes, the great Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs didn't even score a touchdown that game.
Yeah, different game, different set of circumstances.
Yeah,
as
completely.
you noted, that's the reason, bottom line is we feel like your information is so valuable to us because every game is different, every set of injuries are different, and they're going to have a different impact on these games because of, we pointed out a couple different scenarios. We pointed out the one with Tristan Wirth being out, how that affected that particular game against the Rams. The Rams had a great pass rush.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you got a quarterback that's very immobile. Okay, and then on top of that, it was just the overall impact was tremendous. You pointed out the situation with the Chiefs, and they happen to be on the right side of the situation there. So that's one thing about it. In the NFL, every week we've got so many injuries, and being able to evaluate those and the impact that that's going to have on the game. But like I said, your information is extremely valuable to us in every aspect. But the end game and the halftime injury information is really invaluable to us because we've got to make an instant decision. And I don't have a chance to talk to half a dozen people and evaluate it and consider it. I don't have the luxury of it that week. So your information to us on the end game and halftime is extremely valuable to us.
Thank you, Billy. Well, if there's no greater indication of injuries being important, I just got back, as I think you know, from a weekend with my son for the Alabama opener SEC game. And the SEC sees it too, with NIL, but with gambling. For the first time ever, they will have injury reports in college for the first time ever. Now, I don't know it's going to mean a lot because the categories are so broad, probable, questionable, doubtful, and whatever, and they're new at it. But you can see that's the importance of it all and where it's going. And once we get the band, we're going to dabble some in college, but we do anything, we want to do it right. But even the power conference like the SEC sees it coming. And for the integrity of their game and the betting process, they're going to injury reporting to try at least stem that tide. And so that is the importance. Anything else, guys, here?
We had a winning week of college football week 1 this week at Sick Picks,
There
just
you
to
go.
make sure.
There you go.
Let
Well,
you
there's the
guys know.
downside of injuries. Anything else you want to add, Billy, to this? I mean, this is the end of the season with you, the great Billy Walters. Crowdsourced questions here for the first time. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up here and get to the season?
No, not really. I really enjoyed being here. As you know, I don't do a lot of interviews or podcasts, but this is something I've been looking forward to since you've invited me. And thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, we're happy to have you in the War Room at any point this season. You can come join the crowd. We'll be here every Sunday. As my wife kindly reminded me and the kids, Dad's no longer going to be here for 20-some straight Sundays.
Right.
So I'm taking them all to a Padres game this afternoon just because of that. All right, thank you to the great Billy Walters. Best better in the history of sports is recognized by the Sports Gambling Hall of Fame. This is the Pro Football Doc Sports Injury Central podcast. And we'll end on this note, but the season is here, lots of content at SIC Score, and obviously with the regular season, back to the injury information on Mondays leading into the week. Thanks for watching and listening.